Normally, when we speak in Europe about these authoritarian moves, we think of Viktor Orban in Hungary, but we hardly speak of Western European countries. But I think we have to look and to see the reality in front of us. We have observed that some countries really have taken very, very harsh measures to basically crack down on the Muslim civil society. So this is what we have observed for 2020, not only in the case of France, but I think France was really one of the most brutal countries, but also for the country of Austria, where I come from. And we see that there is an alliance between several countries within the European Union that really try to make this the new normal for Muslim lives in Europe, which is on one side making Muslims invisible in terms of their religion. And I think this is what France stands for in its secularist tradition. And then the other thing is the crackdown on Muslim civil society. So wherever you see that you have Muslims organize themselves and try to rally around fighting discrimination and having an agency on their own, this is when hawkish governments like the French one really intervene and try to fully silence these anti-racist organizations and Muslim self-organized Muslim civil society. This goes along and hand in hand with other initiatives, which is something that we can observe far beyond the examples of Austria and France, which is coming basically from the ministers of interior in several Western European nation states, which is the attempt to create a kind of a domestic version of Islam. See, let's say, a French Islam, a German Islam, a Dutch Islam, an Austrian Islam, which is coming from the Ministry of Interior, and therefore it is a perspective taken through the lens of security and trying to have societal freedom, assuming that Muslims in fact pose a security threat potentially to their respective societies and nation states. Other trends that we have seen throughout the years is, on one hand, with something which is very troubling, is the growing militarization of the anti-Muslim far-right milieu, something that we have seen in countries like France, in Germany, Austria, Sweden, where you find far-right organizations which are operating in the underground, which are not threatening primarily Muslims, actually, but the political system. But they are using the Islamophobia because they allege that the political elites, especially in the EU, but also on a national level, conspire along Muslims to Islamize Europe and to create a Muslim Europe, so to say, a Eurabia, as some conspiratorial thinkers have termed this concept or this conspiracy theory. So that is another observation that we had a few years ago. You know, for the Macron case, the whole discourse going after the so-called Islamo-Gauchism, the Islamo-leftist, going against critical scholarship, those academics who use critical race theory or post-colonial studies or decolonial studies in order to frame them as an enemy of the state and allege that they are dividing the society. I mean, all of this discourse that has been emanating from the Ministry of Interior and from Macron himself, that shows that there is a troublesome development in an authoritarian direction, because it goes against freedom of association by closing anti-racist organizations, freedom of speech by going after scholars and academics, and a number of freedoms that normally should be part and parcel of every democratic state where you do have freedom, basic freedoms. So that was one of the reasons why we chose Macron. And I think, normally when we speak in Europe about these authoritarian moves, we think of Viktor Orban in Hungary, but we hardly speak of Western European countries. But I think we have to look and to see the reality in front of us and see that Macron really has a problem in the way he has been using these policies. But again, I mean, it's not so much that Macron as a person is the problem, because obviously the basis for all of these policies was laid long before, also by predecessing governments. So it is not something that Macron alone is responsible for, to be held responsible for, but really a structural problem that we have been seeing that is embedded in the French political system and in the French governing elite that has been in power for the last 2 decades. We are not measuring quantity, but we are seeing that Islamophobia has always been part and parcel of European societies. And I think what is important now is, when Islamophobic claims are not only made by the far right, who are marginalized in terms of their political power, but it is institutionalized by those in power, by centrist governments, then yes, Islamophobia becomes an increasing problem.